in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, inside the gilded walls of the most powerful palace on earth, a woman felt something shift inside her. She was Hatice Sultan, beloved sister of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Royal, respected, untouchable. But today, she wasn't any of those things. Today, she was just a woman, shaking in silence, because she had just learned she was pregnant. Now, for most people, that would be a reason to celebrate. But for Hatice, it felt like a death sentence wrapped in silk, because deep down she knew this baby wasn't just a child. It was a threat to her safety, a threat to her marriage, and worst of all, a threat to what she didn't know was that someone close to her had already made a decision. And when she found out who, this is not a love story. This, Hatice Sultan had been feeling ill for days. At first, she thought it was just stress. She had every reason to be exhausted. Her husband, Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, was distant. The palace, boiling with secrets. And Harem Sultan, rising like a storm, unstoppable. Jealousy hung in the air like poison, and every hallway whispered her name. Then one morning, her doctor arrived. A brief silence, the breath held. And then, Sultanum, you are with child. The world stopped. Hatice smiled, but only for a moment, because she wasn't happy. She was terrified. That night, she sat alone in her chamber. The moonlight spilled across the marble floor like blood. Her hand trembled as it rested on her stomach, already imagining the life growing inside her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this life, this tiny heartbeat, might become a target. You see, in the Ottoman palace, children weren't just blessings. They were weapons. A royal birth meant more than love. It meant power. It meant alliances. It meant war behind silk curtains. Hatice knew this. She had seen it before. She had once lost a child, and it nearly broke her. The grief had crushed her chest like a stone. And even now, years later, she still woke up some nights, choking on sobs, reaching for a cradle that wasn't there. Now, pregnant again, the memories came flooding back. But this time, the fear was different. It wasn't just death she feared. It was betrayal. Ibrahim, the man she had once loved so deeply, was no longer the same. He was colder now, distracted, and Hatice had noticed the way he looked at another woman. Her name was Nigger Kalfa, a servant, a shadow in the halls. Too quiet, too beautiful, too close to Ibrahim. There were rumors, of course, the kind of rumors that slithered between walls and dripped from lips like venom. But Hatice had ignored them, until one day she couldn't. A letter, left on his desk, folded, unsealed. It wasn't addressed to her. Inside, words of longing, passion, guilt, and it was signed N. Hatice read it over and over again, her hands shaking, her stomach turned, not from morning sickness, but from heartbreak. She was carrying this man's child, while he was dreaming of someone else. And in the harem, that kind of betrayal wasn't just cruel. It was dangerous, because if the truth ever got out, if Harem Sultan discovered the affair, she wouldn't just use it to humiliate Hatice. She'd use it to erase her. Every misstep in the palace was like a drop of blood in shark-infested waters. And Hatice was bleeding. She needed to act. Fast. The first step? She summoned Nigger Kalfa. No guards. No yelling. Just two women in a room filled with silence. Nigger, she said, her voice calm. Too calm. You've served me well. But now, it's time for you to start your own life. Nigger was stunned. She barely spoke. Hatice continued. I've chosen a husband for you. You will be married within the month. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a sentence. Nigger nodded. But Hatice saw the fear in her eyes. Because they both knew. This wasn't about love. It was exile, dressed as mercy. But even after Nigger was gone, Hatice still couldn't breathe. Because the real threat wasn't one woman. It was all of them. Harem was planning something. Something big. There were whispers she wanted an official marriage, a royal wedding to Sultan Suleiman himself. A move that would make her children heirs beyond question. And once that happened, Hatice's child would be seen as a threat, or worse, a pawn. Hatice had no illusions. If it came down to protecting her own blood, Harem wouldn't hesitate. She had already proven it, time and time again. And if Hatice stood in her way, well, the palace was full of quiet ways to make someone disappear. Weeks passed. Hatice grew paler, quieter. She stopped walking in the gardens, stopped visiting the baths. She barely ate. And every night, as she lay in bed, one hand on her belly, she whispered the same prayer. Let this child live. Let me live. Just let us live. But she could feel it, the noose tightening. And then came the final blow. One evening, as she sat beside her window, a knock at the door. It was her brother, Sultan Suleiman. He entered slowly, his face unreadable. He had heard about the pregnancy. He came to offer congratulations. But Hatice saw it in his eyes. Doubt, concern, maybe even pity. Even he, the one man who had always protected her, seemed distant now, as if even he couldn't promise her safety anymore. And as he left the room, Hatice whispered under her breath, maybe this palace was never meant for love. In the harem, children weren't just family. They were weapons. A baby could unite powerful factions, or ignite a war. A child with the wrong mother, the wrong father, could tip the balance of power inside the empire's most dangerous place. And Hatice knew. Her child was both blessing and threat. To understand why Hatice was afraid, you need to understand the palace she lived in. Topkapi was a place of beauty and blood. Behind the silks and gold were scars. Behind every smile, a secret. Every hallway echoed with footsteps and with schemes. And Hatice, she was royalty, the sister of Sultan Suleiman. But that didn't make her untouchable. It made her a target. She had married for love. That was her first mistake. Ibrahim Pasha, once a slave, then a soldier, now Grand Vizier, had been her everything. Their love had once shaken the court. It was bold, scandalous, forbidden, but powerful. Too powerful. Their marriage upset the balance. And in Topkapi, when the balance shifts, someone always pays. Now, years later, Hatice was pregnant again. But the man she loved? He was slipping away. Ibrahim was no longer her Ibrahim. He stayed out late. He whispered behind closed doors. And he stopped looking at her like he used to. But Hatice saw everything. And one night she followed him. Down the shadowed corridor. Past the guards who looked away. To the servants' quarters. There, through a barely cracked door, she saw him. With her. Nigger Kalfa. The woman Hatice had once trusted. The woman who had dressed her, cared for her, served her, was now standing inches from her husband, their hands almost touching, their eyes full of something dangerous. Hatice didn't cry. She didn't scream. She turned away and walked back, heart pounding like a war drum, because now it wasn't just her marriage at risk. It was her life, pregnant, alone, betrayed. And still she couldn't tell anyone. Not her brother, the Sultan. Not her ladies-in-waiting. Not even her closest allies. Because in Topkapi, a secret was safer than the truth. The weeks dragged on. Her belly grew. The whispers grew louder. Some said she was ill. Others said she was cursed. One night, she woke to the sound of footsteps. A shadow in her doorway. She reached for the dagger beneath her pillow. The one she'd started sleeping with since she became pregnant. But it was just a servant. With a note. No name. No seal. Just a single sentence. What grows inside you will never see the throne. She didn't sleep again that night. Hatice was terrified, but not paralyzed. She began moving her pieces. She called in loyal guards. She reassigned servants. She burned letters. She watched everyone. And then she summoned Nigger. Face to face, the woman she had once trusted, the woman she had watched standing far too close to her husband. Hatice looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You will leave this palace. You will be married. You will forget his name." Nigger trembled, but said nothing, because she knew, in the palace, exile was a gift. The alternative was death. But the damage was done. Hatice was still pregnant, still alone, still terrified that every time she closed her eyes, she might wake up to find herself bleeding, or worse, her child taken before birth. Because inside the gilded walls of Topkapi, babies didn't just cry. They changed dynasties. And Hatice, she was about to give birth to a child that no one, not her husband, not her enemies, not even her brother, truly wanted. So she did the only thing she could. She disappeared, stopped attending court, stopped hosting guests, stopped smiling. She withdrew into silence, because in the empire's most dangerous palace, sometimes the only way to survive is to vanish before they make you disappear. Hatice had learned this long ago. In the Sultan's harem, survival wasn't about being the most loved. It was about being the most feared. But now she wasn't feared. She was pregnant, vulnerable, a walking target in silk robes. And the timing couldn't have been worse, because at that exact moment, the most dangerous woman in the empire, Hatice Sultan, was preparing to change everything. Hatice wasn't born royal. She was once a slave, then a concubine, and now she was climbing fast. Rumors swirled that Sultan Suleiman planned to marry her, an unthinkable move that would make her the legal wife of the Sultan and her sons, undeniable heirs. If that happened, every other child in the harem, including Hatice's unborn baby, would instantly become a threat to be removed. Quietly, permanently. Hatice knew Hatice. They had once shared laughter, secrets, sisterhood. But now Hatice was different. Cunning, strategic, ruthless, and Hatice was in her way. One morning, Hatice found a bundle left outside her chamber door. It was wrapped in gold silk. Inside, a single pomegranate cut in half. At first glance, innocent. But in the palace, nothing was innocent. Pomegranates symbolized fertility and blood. It was a message. Hatice didn't flinch. She summoned her most loyal servant, a mute woman named Lael. Lael had no tongue, but she had eyes and ears everywhere. Hatice whispered only one command: follow Hatice, watch, report, but never speak. Within days, Lael returned with something far worse than Hatice imagined. Hatice wasn't just planning a wedding. She was gathering allies, guards, midwives, even poisoners. Hatice's pregnancy wasn't just a problem. It was a liability. That night, Hatice couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers until sunrise, one hand on her growing belly, the other gripping her dagger. She couldn't trust Ibrahim. He was too lost in his own ambition. She couldn't go to her brother. Suleiman was blind when it came to Hatice. She was alone, except for one person. As dawn broke, Hatice did something she hadn't done in years. She visited the tomb of her first child, the one she lost years ago. No guards, no veil, just her, the grave, and the quiet. She knelt, placed her hand on the cold stone, and whispered, "I won't let this one be taken from me." And from that moment on, Hatice changed. She began writing letters, secret ones, to allies outside the palace. She summoned physicians from foreign lands. She started building a quiet network of protection, guards who answered only to her. And she made one final, chilling decision. If anything happened to her, if she died during childbirth, her enemies would not survive her. Hatice Sultan, once soft, grieving, heartbroken, was now something else entirely. A mother, a warrior, a ghost in silk armor. Because in the Ottoman palace, the only thing more dangerous than a jealous rival was a woman with nothing left to lose. And Hatice, she was prepared to lose everything, except her child. Hatice didn't cry. Not at first. She simply stood there, letter trembling in her hand, the ink still fresh, the words soaked in betrayal. It was a love letter. Soft, intimate, secret. But the worst part? It wasn't addressed to her. It was for Nigger Kalfa, a servant girl in the palace. Quiet, modest, easily overlooked. Until now. Because now, she was carrying Hatice's husband's heart. Hatice folded the letter carefully, slipped it into her robes, and walked out of the room like nothing had happened. But inside something shattered. For weeks, she had told herself the coldness in Ibrahim's eyes was just stress, that the distance was just temporary. But it wasn't. It was love, for someone else. And now, she wasn't just alone in the palace. She was alone and pregnant, with the child of a man who had already given his soul to another. But this wasn't just about heartbreak. In the Ottoman Empire, Love didn't end in tears. It ended in blood. Hatice was a sultan's sister. She was royal. Ibrahim Pasha was a slave who had risen through the ranks. Their marriage had been a scandal, blessed only because of Sultan Suleiman's deep trust in his Grand Vizier. But betrayal? That wasn't just a personal failure. It was political suicide. If this affair became public, Ibrahim wouldn't just lose his marriage. He would lose his head. And Hatice had a choice. Expose him, watch the empire tear him apart, or stay silent and let herself rot in shame. She chose neither. Instead, she waited. One night, she followed Ibrahim. Silently. Alone. He moved quickly through the palace corridors, past the guards, down a forgotten hallway, and into a servant's chamber. Hatice stood in the dark, hidden behind the wall, and listened. There was laughter, soft whispers, then the sound of a kiss. Hatice didn't move. She didn't scream, didn't run. She just watched, because now she knew something even darker than betrayal. She knew how to destroy him. The next morning, Ibrahim found a note on his desk. No signature, just 5 words. Does the Sultan know yet? It was enough to make his hands shake, because in this palace, secrets never stayed buried long, and if the Sultan discovered he had dishonored his sister, even love wouldn't save him. But Hatice didn't tell her brother. Not yet. Instead, she turned to the one thing she still had control over, the child growing inside her. She began sleeping with a dagger beneath her pillow. She sent trusted guards to shadow niggers every step. And every time Ibrahim came to her chambers, she smiled and said nothing, because now she held the power. And she knew, if this palace could take everything from her, then she could take everything back with one whisper. In the Ottoman Empire, betrayal was a game played in shadows. And Hatice Sultan, she had just learned the rules. And now, she was ready to play. Narrator low, deliberate. A week later, a servant girl vanished. No warnings, no goodbyes, just silence. Her name was Nigger Kalfa, the same woman Hatice had seen in her husband's eyes in that letter in her nightmares. Some say she fled in shame. Others whispered she was taken in the middle of the night. But those closest to the palace, they believe something else. They say Hatice didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply watched the walls close in. And when the time was right, she made one quiet request to someone loyal. A favor buried beneath layers of silence. Because in the harem, justice didn't come in daylight. It came in shadows. No witnesses. No trace. Just a name erased. And Ibrahim Pasha? He knew. But he said nothing. Because in the Ottoman court, power was fragile. One wrong word, and he could join Nigger wherever she had gone. So he held his wife, kissed her forehead, and pretended he didn't feel the knife she had buried in his fate. This wasn't just a tale of love gone wrong. It was a warning, because in Topkapi Palace, secrets don't sleep. They wait.